Hey, good evening, everybody. It's Friday night, August the 15th, summer night here in Ojai. Just turning on the old recorder again. Hopefully going to be putting together something else for YouTube. I think I've been brainstorming some ideas and what I want to talk about a little bit, and I want to clarify a little bit because I know it probably floats through some individuals' minds about this whole homelessness thing. I mean, I'm not ashamed of it. I say that it is that I am, and I have been without consistent living quarters for a few years, and I have been without consistent work for a few years, and I think it merits a little bit of talking about to explain some of the my ideas around what's happening here, both logistically and how the spirituality plays into it as well. Now, I've said before that I make a really long, complicated story, which includes my whole conversion testimony in that time, so that gives you an idea about some of it. That the basics of this is I was with the same woman for 12 years, my wife Stacy, and in 2011 when I went through that divorce, I also kind of simplify it, and I don't know how else to say it, so I tell people, well, basically I walked into divorce court without an attorney, and I pretty much lost everything I had, and I don't usually get a chance, and I'm not generally interested to qualify what I mean by that, and I'm not going to get into every single little detail of it, but that is true. It is a true thing, and I don't mean to say that my wife took everything away. It's just that we were living in a place where she moved out of during the time when she sought that divorce, and I had no say in it. I was gone for several days and returned to an empty house, as I've also talked about. My name was on the lease, of course. There was a lot of legal things going on, so I couldn't get back in the house. And I also explained that I worked for 8 years doing a courier service as a subcontractor through my wife. So the company I worked for in Westminster, that I delivered legal documents back and forth, which was just part-time work, but it was consistent for me. I lost that job. So the basis of it is when the divorce hit and it was so sudden and everything was over, and the house was gone and there was no money coming in for me, and the bank accounts were closing, the credit cards had been canceled, the gas cards were gone. It left me in a position where, even though I still had a few assets left, like we had a $950 car, Blue Book value at that time, and I was left with that. And I also had a motorcycle, a 2009 very nice Yamaha V-Star, and that was going to be what I was going to get myself out of complete poverty with. But of course, it would take time to sell those. But and I did sell those, and I actually purchased a van that I live in now with those items. But it was a big blow for me, and that's how the initial explosion started on this whole homeless trend thing. And I'm also not happy to say that I made some bad decisions. Up to that point, my credit was fine. I did go into a little bit of debt, and currently I am also in a little bit of debt, probably a couple of $1,000s. So when you get these kind of logistics, when you hear the old saying, and I did take the bull by the horns, as they say, and tighten my bootstraps and get out there and start looking for work. But as I've explained, I was not 6 months before I was converted, and just prior to that suicide attempt I talked about, and it was really tough for me to find some steady work, and I wasn't having any luck doing that. I did really get myself involved in a couple of places, trying to put my best foot forward to get into some place, but initially what ended up happening is I ended up staying in the back. Well, first I was sleeping on the floor in the storage room. I did lose my storage because I wasn't able to come up with the money in time for the rent during that 6-month period, and all my stuff that was in my storage was taken away from me, and it was auctioned. But I did sleep on the floor in there for a while. I had some friends who let me stay in the back of a pickup truck that I stayed in for a while, and I was really trying to do it, and it never really caught on. But after several weeks or a couple of months, I did manage to sell the motorcycle, and I did manage to get rid of the car that we had, and I bought this van, which, praise God, has been running good for over 2 years now, 2.5 years, and it'll be 3 years actually in December that I've had this van, and so this is where I've been staying. And a lot of that debt that I talked about, I won a couple $1,000s in debt, really occurred as a direct result of not being able to find any employment and living off of credit cards. I had a couple of credit cards. I mean, I counted. I've been on record as saying I put out as many as 70 different job applications and resumes, and it was very discouraging during that time because I was in contact with some people, and I talked to some cousins back east, and they would tell me news like, oh man, I know a guy who worked for the college education, worked for the same company for 16 years, he laid off, and now he has no job. So here's me, who's not even college educated. I'm just a regular grunt type worker or blue collar worker, and it was not looking good, and it wasn't due to any effort, lack of effort. I could say that. It just was not looking good. So literally, I was out of my house by September 5th, and I didn't even get my first job offer. So this was September of 2011, the first week. I didn't get my first job offer until March of 2012, which, thank the Lord, and was a direct result of Him, I'm sure, right after my baptism, 48 hours after I got baptized and decided on the road to repentance. That's when the phone rang, and there's definitely a supernatural story around that. And I came back up here to Ojai and started working. So, I mean, we're talking a 6-month window where I was putting out job applications everywhere, and I could not get an offer for any steady work. At one point, the closest I came was I had about a six week stay at one place where they were giving me the opportunity to sleep in the back of a truck on a certain property, just to stay there, just to be able to stay there on the private property, to have some place to sleep for working. So I was doing like gardening and taking out the trash just to be able, and that was the closest during that time that I actually came to being able to get any kind of work. And I was hoping at one point, and this would be December 2011, and I was really banking on that turning into a job. I was given some misleading information that would turn into a job, and it certainly didn't help with what was happening to me on my downward spiral. But this was before I got saved. I mean, we're talking a couple of months before. So now I just view it as that was part of the process of what was supposed to happen. But that definitely helped contribute. I talk about that 6-month period between September and March, how it was just a downward spiral, and that was a big part of it. Not being able to get work and not being able to get any stability on my own. In December was the month when the car I had was finally sold, and the motorcycle I had was finally sold by that point, and the money that I had I used to purchase this van that I'm staying in now, and it's a relatively newer van, and it was in good shape, so I put out over a couple $1,000s for it, and that's what I ended up doing with my money. And that was the first little step of stability, but in a way it actually put a little more pressure on me, because by January 2012 now I had an expense too. I had to pay for gas, I had to pay for registration, we had to get all the other things that go with it, DMV fees, and that just by the skin of my teeth, and the pressure was just building and building all paralleling with my conversion story and what was inspiring me to go on that path that I was of self-destruction that I talked about as well. So you could see how from September to March there's this downward spiral. I'm trying to get work. I'm just using a little bit. I'm living off of credit. I finally sell my bike and the car and I buy this van, but nothing really happening by that point. And so I'm pretty well established in this kind of homelessness, and I'm not doing well with it. But this is not about that. Before I go any further explaining and bringing together the conjunction of the spirituality and my life in Christ in this journey now outdoors, as it were, I guess at this point I have to make a few confessions and talk about a few shortcomings of myself. And this is one anybody who knows me probably doesn't focus on, but they kind of know it about me. I mean, when I was younger, in my early 20s, people would say, well, Bill lives a different kind of lifestyle, whether it was my uncles or my siblings. And what they meant by that is it was apparent by the time I'm 21, 22 years old that because I was in such hot pursuit of this musical career and in the entertainment industry, that many times entertainers and people in the music industry, they earn money by diverse means. Maybe they'll teach a little bit, maybe they'll work in a coffee shop for a couple hours a week, and I'm no exception to that. I kind of strung along on tag-along jobs that would last 4 to 6 months, where I was only working part-time. Sometimes I'd teach guitar lessons. It was no exception, as I'm saying. And I think when you start to get, generally when a person's 22, 23 years old, their siblings and their peers by that point are in the process of really starting to get rooted in whatever they're doing in modern society, if they're not musicians and actors and entertainers, and they're starting families by that point. So, by that point it became clear for me that there's a real split. There's sort of something different going on, in that I'm not looking for a career and a job, some kind of job, a 9 to 5 or standardized job, being in an office or be it driving a truck or any specialty field. I wasn't, my focus was, honing my craft as a musician and in the entertainment industry, and I had every intention of making my living doing that, no matter how hard I had to try or how long it was going to take, like a lot of other musicians. So part of that is, from a young age, you're not really rooted in working these full-time jobs. I'd never really done that from the time I was a kid to this minute right here, right now, in this day and age. That trend is, although I've changed and my convictions have changed and my spirituality has changed, that has not changed. So generally, before this 3-year period where I've really been isolated and really been alone, more so than I've ever been in my life, even though I was living like that, out here in California, you tend to find other people who are living that way too, and what becomes kind of abnormal, back east or back home amongst your family, your siblings, or your peers that you grew up with. That's the norm out here, is that everybody's kind of like that. They're trying to do enough to get by, but not get themselves so inundated with work that they can concentrate on their passion, which is their career in the entertainment field. So I would, consequently, growing up in California here, you get 4 roommates, so if an apartment was $750 and you had 3 or 4 guys in on it, all you had to do, work in those part-time jobs, or if you can get a little bit of money from your, for your birthday or for Christmas here and there, everybody did all right. That's just how it was, You didn't have to really suffer the consequences of being a work-a-day drab kind of individual like you've seen your peers doing back east or that you grew up with and your siblings. You can just focus on your career, work a little bit doing telemarketing you know, handyman work with someone or something when you were growing up, and you could make a few $100 a month if that's what you needed to do, and it was enough to get by. It was great, you know, to be able to do that. So that's how you get by at that time. Also, you know, by the time I was and you get girlfriends and you get significant others, and they're working part-time jobs, and they're musicians and they're actresses and things of that nature too. So you put yourself together, and this is how it was when I was young. You know, when I say young, I mean, you know, 25, you know, 23 through 30. That's what's going on. You're meeting people, and that's how you're living. So you can get by and living like that. That's was the difference. And for all intents and purposes, I did that very late until I was 30 years old. You know, that was pretty much how it worked. You know, get a little bit here, work a little bit there, get a roommate or three here, rent a room here, and that was just kind of how I was dragging along. And it was consistent in its inconsistency, I like to say, and that's just how it was. But it was a completely unexpected when I met my wife Stacy. That was, you know, it was a great thing to be able to meet her, and when I turned 30 or 31, and we, you know, I spent until I was 41 with her. So, you know, 11, I think it was a little over 11 years. I might have my numbers botched. And it was completely natural, and I wasn't making a lot of money at the time, and you know, my wife had a master's degree, she had a bachelor's degree, and she was working a really good job, and we just hit it off, and she was my best friend, and I never took advantage. You know, it was the kind of thing where it was funny because I thought that she would just like dump me off as soon as she knew that, because what would happen was it started getting weird around 28, because I'd start dating women, I'd see women who I really liked, and I wanted to pursue a meaningful long-term relationship with them. But as soon as they found out, it was like, well, you know, it's not that you're not charming, it's not that you're not talented, but I'm almost 30 years old, and I need a guy who's making money. And so that's when I started to realize that as you get up in age, when you don't have your rooting in that consistent job where you're making a consistent paycheck, you can be judged for it or ruled out as a potential mate for someone. And I learned that, and it was interesting because when I met my wife Stacy, and I who was to be my wife, when I dated her, I thought, well, you know, she's going to do the same thing the last 5.5, 6 girls have done. She's gonna see that I don't make a lot of money, that I'm and she's gonna rule me out. But it was a real blessing, and it was a real surprise when I learned that she really loved me for who I was, or she really liked me for who I was. And you know, it's like weird. Then all of a sudden, she's like, you know, you just do what you can. You know, just do what you can. Don't worry about. You don't have to. I don't like you because of how much money you can or cannot make. And that's when, you know, in a way, I got that blessing, and we started building together. And of course, after a few years of our relationship, we were married. And then everything, it's no longer becomes his and hers; it becomes ours, right? And that's where you start getting into that community property and things like that. So. That was the dynamic and where that had changed. Now, obviously, to jump over, you know, you get used to a certain lifestyle after 11 years with someone, and we did build each other up to quite an extent. I mean, we both progressed a lot, and what we were able to do independently and financially, as far as our abilities to make money as a team. We both really, you know, we wrote a book together, we published a book together. It was just amazing, you know. She was my best friend, and you don't plan on a divorce, especially not when you're with someone. Once you hit that 10-year mark, you kind of think it's forever. But, you know, obviously there was holes in the machine, which this is not here to be discussed. But the point is that when that marriage kind of fell apart, and I didn't have any resources or money, it's not like you have the resilience when you're 25 or the resilience you had when you were like 32 or 34. Over 40 years old. I've had the same job for many years. It took me a long time to build up the stability that I did have, and it was a logistical and emotional toll, and it crushed me in every capacity when that happened. Even though I was trying to be tough, I didn't just put my head in the sand and say I quit. That wasn't it. I was fighting for a half a year to do that, and it just when you can't. And here's let me turn it off. So we know that. I'm just trying to be careful not to cross the line into portions of what was happening the last 8 weeks before my self-extinction attempt and the emotion. So I got it because it's kind of paralleling with that, up to this point. But we're going to get by that, and we're going to talk about now. Let's just go right till after I'm baptized and that whole conversion thing that we all know about is over. Obviously, it's just me. It's just the van. There's still no work. Now, I left this out of my last testimony, but it was amazing, and it's good because I'll get to share this little bit of it that's quite interesting, that puts me on the path to get me back on the rail here to this topic of homelessness and how it's endured and how it's here to stay for right now, and why. By saying this is that, after all that stuff happened and I was baptized, and I was sitting in a parking lot in Orange County, 24 hours after I was baptized, and there was something very scary happened, and it was supernatural, because I had a thought about, well, maybe now that I'm saved and I'm baptized, I could think about, maybe leaving Earth. And as soon as that happened, now if anybody heard my conversion testimony, I'm not going to go into much, but I told you about 12 demons. One of the demons actually appeared in front of my car, as if to say, nobody. It was like the Lord's way of saying, nobody. That's not the way this is going to go. And this is relevant for this very reason right here. I became so scared. I said, Lord, God, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And the only thing I could think in that regard was, I don't have a job. I can't. What am I going to do? And as soon as I thought that, my cell phone was sitting on my lap, and the phone rang, and it was the person who called me and said, we have a job. We're going to require you for several weeks. You can stay on property. So the Lord literally, in my most down moment right after my baptism, for the first time in 6 months, a job opened up for me right after my baptism, and that was how I ended up here, and that's how I tell it. But enough of that. So up at that point, when I got that first job, which ended up being longer than just a few weeks, it ended up being more like a few months, which was also good, not because of the point because it was built, because I was getting a lot of money. I was actually spending the money almost, on basic expenses and food as fast as I can get it, saving a small amount. Maybe always have like 175 to 200 saved while I was eating, after I got those first couple of checks. And maybe March through the summer of 2012, just coming into 2013, there was a lot of parallels going on, where that's where I started finding a lot of my books, and that's where I was really started getting into the Word of God and understanding what this repentance thing was going to require. See, because before any of that happened, even after I got baptized, I knew that the biggest thing and the Lord knew, the biggest thing that I needed to do, which was really leading to a lot of my problems, besides my spiritual problems that had been forming my whole life, as discussed in my occult roots talk that I talked to you guys about, was that I was going to need to work. A full-grown man living on his own in the world needs to work, and that was what it was coming down to. And the Lord, thank God, I thank God He knew that, but I knew that too. So once I satisfied my initial commitment, throwing up my hands in the air on that day on March 12th and saying, Lord, I surrender, I want to do your will, and whatever happened after that with convictions and rebuking, I did receive that baptism, and I did know at that time that I was, for all the troubles I had, logistically and spiritually,
that I was going to try to walk this walk, and I didn't know how I was going to do it. The only thing I knew was that I needed to work. I needed to have work. I needed to get, because you can't try to change your life if you're worrying about how you're going to feed yourself. And thank God the Lord knew that, because He brought me up here to Ojai, up north. Took me out of Orange County 72 hours after that baptism, and I started working that job. And being on that job for 3 months, during that time when I wasn't working in the early mornings, I'd walk out, and that was when I picked up the Bible and started reading it. Go, okay, well, let me just see about this now. And that was where that process, and that was when the books started appearing. And that was also where some temptations and different things that I was doing wrong were also revealed to me. But that's where that whole evolution of getting on the path to learning to be holy like He's holy came along. So that was as good as it was going to get at that point. Of course, there was people saying, well, you keep working the job and eventually you'll get your own apartment, you can get a room for rent, you can get this. And there were various points where now this is where I have to start talking about my intuition telling me what perhaps could be, and I could be wrong about this, the bigger will or the bigger picture that perhaps the Lord has in mind for me. Because the Lord is sovereign, He's all powerful, and He can put you in positions to get you convicted. He can make sure that once you're crushed and you think you're down and out, He can open a door for you like He opened for me and brought me up here to the job. And then He can give you the will to, when you're not doing that job, to get into His Word and seek repentance and learn what He expects from you in the years to come in your life. And all that is true. But the thing is this, there were times where I did seek to get into a room, and for whatever reason, it never worked out. I could think of 2 or 3 situations that maybe occurred between, in 2012, let's just say, where I thought about it, but I knew it was a sketchy situation because the money I was making was always just enough to pay for fuel and food and basic expenses that I needed to just stay alive and to maintain myself and do what I needed to do as far as, staying on the path and staying just above water. So that's what was happening. I guess the point of what I'm trying to say is this, is that, look, don't make any mistake about it. I don't enjoy sleeping in a van night after night. It's not comfortable. I know for a fact that there's certain people who would look at me and who say about me, oh, he must like it that way, just doing the least he needs to do to get by. And some people, in a very ironic twist of fate, have even said to me, there's people who would pay to live their life like you're living your life right now. And yeah, that's dandy, and yeah, I suppose I could see that and believe it, but you know what? Now I'm not here to complain about the situation the Lord has given me, because He could have let me pull off my suicide attempt and I could be dead and in hell right now. So by comparison to that, this is paradise, okay? But as I said, I don't have any desire to sleep in a van. It's not very comfortable. I don't like dealing with the extreme weather. It's very dry. It's extremely hot here in the summer. It's not something I enjoy. The winter could get very cold. We've had nights where it goes down to 16, 18 degrees in December and January and through March here. So it's been challenging for me to deal with those kind of things. Not having any privacy, it's a small town, it closes down early, and if you got to go to the bathroom after 9 o'clock, you better have a cup or a bag in your car, because you're not getting in there, And so, I don't want to open up the complaint department, and that's not what I'm seeking to do. The point is that there are times where I've done a couple of different things. I have looked for full-time employment, and I have started on jobs that, for all intents and purposes, it was clear at the outset, this is part-time, this is temporary, this is casual, and we reserve the right, to keep you on or take you off whenever we'd like. And they were always clear about that, and I always got compliments on the jobs that I was doing in those jobs that I set out on to do. I've done a string of temporary jobs, and people again may say, why don't your temporary jobs turn into long-term jobs or full-time jobs? And the answer to you is honestly this: I don't know. I put out my best effort. I do the best I could. I work as honestly and as hard as I could. And it's just, sometimes somebody returns, or sometimes somebody leaves and something else happens. And in a couple of cases, maybe it's politics and people don't like something about a certain situation, so they make some changes, and then I end up being the low guy on the totem pole. And there's been a number of reasons with these temporary jobs. But one thing is clear about them all: they were right for me at the time that I had them. My intention was to go as long and hard as I could and to get as much out of it as I could and do the best job I could. But they never lasted. And they did take care of me, and they did provide for me in that time. And in a way, it's helped me develop more faith in God, because just when you think, oh God, if I need work now because the money's running out and I can't eat, how am I going to put gas in my car? How am I going to pay for my registration and smog check that's coming up in 2 weeks? And every time something has come up and I've been able to work, and there's no exception to that as of right now as I'm speaking to you. So you start to look at the bigger picture, and it's like, okay, am I just pulling this off out of chance or luck after 3 years of doing this way? No, there's no chance. There's no luck. The Lord wants me where He wants me, and I'm pretty sure that is going to be true. And I'm just starting to get ideas as to why I think that is. He talks about people being poured out wine and broken bread, and I don't think at this point, at the beginning of my conversion and conviction, I was poured out and I was broken, and maybe that's what got me the grace that I got now, and the mercy that I have now for what He's provided for me. And I love to think that He's watching out for me and He provides for my basic needs. But if the Lord, here it is. Of course, guys. Of course I want to go to a place where I can get a little bit of steady money. I can enjoy what I'm doing. I can feel like there's integrity in what I'm doing. I could make a difference. I could make money. And I can go home. Here's that word, home, at night. And open a door and just lay down on a bed. A bed. Of course, guys. Of course I want that. I don't want to live in a van. I don't want to deal with these extreme temperatures. But here's the thing, guys. Here's the thing. When you become intuitive to the point, when you're out here, everything's about economy. It's about economy of emotions, economy of how you're eating and what are you eating, economy of the money you're spending, economy of the company you keep. It's such a delicate balance, because you got to try to keep your wits about you, living on the street like this, living outside like this. The Lord has done some wonderful things, right? That's obvious. He saved me. He could have let me die. He could have sent me to hell. He got me baptized. He got me out just when I needed to be out. Got me the job. He's provided all the information and material in the forms of books. He's answered my prayers. I hope that for His sake He's forgiven me for my sins, and He's heard me, and He watches out for me. Guys, here's the thing. If that's true, even though right now I do want to be out of the van, and I don't want to live outside, and I don't want to deal with it anymore, I have to think that it's the Lord, because it's like I have tried to look for jobs so that I can make enough money to afford to stay in a place. Right now, since this thing has started, in these last almost 3 years now, I've probably made about $500 a month on a good month. On months where weren't going so good, maybe $350, $375, and this is all doing the same thing. Odd jobs, some days more, some days less. I think that I'm on a limitation system from the Lord. I've applied for jobs where I could possibly make more, but they just never come through for me. And here's the thing, guys. Here it is. When the Lord decides that he's gonna answer my prayer, or that he's gonna give me something more. He's gonna have to know that I'm ready to handle that and be responsible to handle that. Because if that's the case, look, I sleep literally 40 feet in between multi-million-dollar mansions that have multiple rooms open that could be given to me, but they're not given to me, and I have tried to get them. Okay? I sleep that close to these rooms, and the room is never offered to me. I'm never asked to come inside. And I'm not saying I take that personally, but here it is. If it was the Lord's will for me to do such, He would instantly have one of the people who has property, who has a room, come up to me and simply speak the truth. And the truth being this: hey man, I know you're a consistent guy. I know you don't drink. I know you don't do drugs. I know you're honest. I know you're not a thief, and you've been here for a few years, and you're a pretty decent guy, and you're a likable guy. I know you don't make a lot of money, but I'd like to offer you a room, and you can come in here and you could stay in my house, man. Maybe the first couple of months you don't have to give me nothing. You could just hang out, and when you pick up, and then maybe after the third month, maybe you can throw me down a few $100s and we could work something out. Do you know how easy it would be for the Lord to make that to happen? It would be so easy for the Lord to make that happen. I literally sleep in my car in between multi-million-dollar mansions where everybody knows who I am, and for all intents and purposes they like me. And at various times I have asked them if I can come in, and I don't get to go in. And I don't think I don't get to go in because I'm a bad guy or because they know I'm a thief. Au contrary. It's just something that the Lord is doing for me. Maybe He doesn't want me there right now. That's just how it is. Because if He wanted me there, He'd open up the job where enough money would come through, and He'd make someone approach me and say, okay, Billy, I'm going to take it. Here it is. At this point in my life, guys, you hear, it's no fallacy. You hear people say, die to your old life. I've died to my old life, to a large extent. My egotistical pursuits as far as music are gone. My passionate and egotistical and vanity pursuits for fitness and what I used to get out of that, I've died to them. My sexuality, I've died to it. It doesn't exist anymore. My money, I put it all in His hands. What He wants me to have, I trust He's going to give me the work. So I'm just, especially over this last year, I'm giving up everything to trust in Him. And when you start to give up these things, your sexuality, your egotism, your vanity, your reliance to get money, and you put it all in His hands, you start to realize certain things that He provides for you. And I really get a strong take and angle on that. And when the Lord wants to provide a place for me to live, when He says it's time to come out of the van and go into a place, that's when it's going to be time. Not when I decide. I know, because I've learned this, because I have been frustrated over the last 2 years. Like I said, I don't particularly enjoy being in this situation, but when He sets it up and He says it's time for you to come out, I can trust you to be on your own. I can trust you to be in private. I can trust you to have a quiet place of your own where you can close the door. Then He's going to give it to me. And right now I have to just relinquish my desire for that, like I've relinquished my desire and my vanity and my ego and all that kind of stuff, and my life and my finances to Him. I'm just relinquishing my concerns about that and my discomfort to Him that I feel in this van, because when He's ready, He'll provide me with the place where I need to be. So that's why I think I'm homeless still, guys. It's not that I'm not doing anything. It's not that I like it. It's not that I'm lazy or I'm irresponsible. I've just given everything up for the Lord, and I know there's still more to give up for the Lord, and there's still more things I need to prove to Him, and there's so much more I need to do. So unfortunately for me, but He can change it at any time, that just hasn't happened yet, and I believe that's why I still live in my car, because this is where He wants me for right now, because there's some other purpose, and it fulfills that, Oh, boy, I'll tell you, man, that scripture came to my mind that said, I must become less so that He can become more. Be blessed, everybody. Thanks for listening.